Sup Shredders, my name is Logan, aka Spiderhands, and welcome to an SPReacts, where today we got ourselves a track from an act named AFM titled Jinx. And if we switch over to here, we got ourselves a track here on SoundCloud. Get that up in there on the screen. I should note this is not the first time I've reviewed AFM's music. We previously checked out their track titled Ajax 2, so we're good to check out more. We're going to listen through this track from start till finish, and we're going to hear what we think. Let's do it, let's go. What do we got?
Sound is transmitted through the air as vibrations, which are detected by the eardrum and interpreted by the brain.
I like the polish that production, eh? Back to the original idea. It's just polyrhythms there. Well, not necessarily. If we've got quarters and triplets, it works. Very use of adjustment of... Yeah, I like the way that we kind of slowly filtered downward in terms of the frequency response. The intensity of that last little kind of sequencer there, that was kind of cool. It shows an understanding, fundamental understanding of post, which kind of gives a kind of further context to the track, that it's more minimalist primarily out of choice rather than not necessarily knowing how to add more. Now, I should just sort of like mention something here, but that's not me saying the track itself, at least in terms of structure, is minimalist, because it certainly isn't. There's a lot of different ideas. It's just more that when we have a specific element or another, it's almost like we want to sort of switch off the next thing before it gets too busy, but we'll talk about it more in the conclusion. Because welcome to the conclusion of my review of this track from an act named AFM titled Jinx. In this section, I'm going to provide an overall song analysis of everything from lyrics, vocals, all the way through to studio production, as well as any applicable constructive critique, and then finally my general thoughts from a listener's perspective. But first of all, what do we think this track is about? Apparently, a jinx is someone or something that brings bad luck or a curse that attracts negative fortune. It can also refer to the act of causing misfortune to someone, which is ironic because I feel very fortunate to have been able to listen through this track today. It was a very pleasant listen. We have that starting point there, that intro with the guy narrating how sound is processed by ears and brains and stuff like that. And I think that that's just a really interesting way to start a piece like this, especially one that is predominantly instrumental without a whole lot of lead kind of carrying us through, or at least a specific one. You have occasional sort of vocal chops, just the come on and but like we're very sort of like hesitant to, I think, affect the flavor of all the different melodic and harmonic elements that we have within this track. It's more an adventure through a lot of maybe the different influences and kind of like sounds that, you know, AFM wants to put together within this one. Structurally, it's fascinating because even though there are some parts we do come back to, like that intro kind of setup, we're just kind of twisting and turning with a similar tempo in a way that's actually quite satisfying. It never becomes dull. It's almost like we're hesitant to have something for too long, but the transfers are clean and seamless. We don't need to staircase it. You have that fantastic sort of riser at the start of the piece there with those 16th and 32nd note kicks, which is just great use of looping there and rhythm there. Effectively a mixture of like a chord note groove across the beat there with a mixture of half time maybe on normal time parts there with the kick pushing forward, but also you've got those snares and clicks and the hi-hats fairly resonant in the mix, but with a variation in terms of how those hi-hats are developed as well. We're not just like sitting on an 8th group or something like that. We add some 16ths in there. And we even have some sort of syncopated and on-beat snares as well to kind of almost add like a kind of a breakish kind of feeling to it. And we mix up the amount of kicks we have or the lack of cymbals and stuff like that as we go through the piece and add sort of like different affectations, I think primarily to adjust the flow and mood of it, because even if we're, again, kind of stating as a given that it is a track with a lot of different chapters, it doesn't necessarily mean that the drums need to be consistent to carry that forward. We add filtering of the kit at certain parts as well to affect the feel of it, but that filtering affects some of the other elements attached to that as well, so the whole track kind of evolves and grows. There are even some interesting sort of pitched sort of like hi-hats. So we have like around the minute mark, for example, that had more of a sizzle to it as opposed to anything else. And because they have a note, add further into the overall harmony of the piece. And I think the offbeat patterns of those hi-hats as well add a further sense of speed and pace to the track that might otherwise sort of not be there if we're even doing both the onbeats and offbeats. I think at the end there, when you have everything kind of come down a little bit before that final build and push there, you simply have the hi-hats forming more of a supportive role, but not one to push any further. And like we have filtering, and I think we have just a lack of low end in that point to make it a bit less sort of bass intensive there and to allow the bell curve to go down. But for it to come back up and then kind of fake out again is kind of interesting there. There are a lot of other interesting synth layers as well throughout this. Like we have some basses that form the kind of ground floor for the pad elements that we have in mid to upper range there. The vocal chops are sometimes melodic and add to the overall sort of feel of the track. And then we have these kind of perky little synths that kind of buzz in and beep away there and it kind of dance across the stereo field and frequency spectrum in a way that's very sort of like pleasant, and they play nicely alongside the main sort of chord progressions from those very sort of warm pads. How the pads as well are processed is really interesting because they kind of warble in and out there. There's a kind of a liquid feel to it. And it's very kind of soothing to listen to. You feel like your eardrums are being massaged. There's no real harsh textures in this at all, to be honest. It's very well balanced in post, but you know, considering we're talking about the actual instrumental parts and the way things are arranged as well, I think that's also a compliment in terms of the composition. We switch things up in terms of the bass line and stuff like that to add different sequences and different melodies in there, and we have different instruments to put those sort of moods and vibes forward to further sort of segment them. But it never feels too disparate, in part because of the smoothness of the post-production, but also because of the consistency of the tempo and the way that drums have enough similarity despite what I mentioned about the slight adjustments to keep things going forward. And I think even that kind of like vocal chops, such as around the 45-second mark there, and the way we kind of come down and oscillate and harmonize in ways that are maybe a little bit like less conventional, it's just very sort of interesting. It's almost like we're kind of ambivalent about the actual key signature or chord progression we want to have as well. They're like, we are going through a tunnel and we're not necessarily sure what's going to be on the other side. I'm just glad though that we do come back to that sort of original sort of concept within the minute mark there, because it helps to tie up this piece together. Because at 1 minute 53 it is still quite short, but because of how much we go through, it could still feel a bit discombobulating if everything was random. I think rhythmically what we've got going on with the sequencer at the end there with the triplets, but I know I mentioned there was a polyrhythm. I don't think it is. When we've got eighths, 1 and 2 in triplets there, it's just kind of cool to have different instruments playing different parts there to sort of mess with the feel of it there. I think that's a kind of a sensible decision there, to not only have a lead come up and sort of be perky on top, but for it to present itself in a way that's, you know, dissimilar from what we've had prior, just to kind of like not take the listener's attention for granted, to kind of bounce around and be sort of calmly exciting. There's so much other air candy and so much other nuance in there that I feel like tracks like this, they typically need a much longer video, but I already make long videos. So it's just kind of talking about the things that I suppose are potentially most meaningful to me, whilst also addressing the fact that there's a sophistication to this composition that allows for further listens. I think there's definitely re-listen value in this. I mean, like in terms of like the overall kind of feel of the track with the sevenths extensions and the chord progressions and the way sort of triads dance around the diatonics, they're major or minor or otherwise there, with some kind of chromaticism, I suppose, and as well as like playfulness with the intensity of those sort of frequency bands. You have a piece which is trying to sort of remind you of how good music can feel to listen to, in a way that I think shows a lot of different colors. And I think AFM is trying to sort of maybe, with these different stylings and a lack of a consistent dominant main sort of bass line or chord progression, show you the different ways in which you can enjoy this kind of music that they make. With the outro being sort of ambiguous enough for you to kind of want to know more, simply because it's like, okay, we had all this pleasant stuff, why is there not more? Is there going to be more of this in future tracks? And I just feel that we didn't overstay our welcome. We provided enough to understand the caliber of the musician that we're dealing with, And ultimately, yeah, it was just fantastic. There's just a lot going on in there, including that little break around the 20-second mark that makes this feel sort of very sort of freeform and almost sort of experimental in a way. And I kind of like that we're taking risks. I think in this situation, none of them did not pay off. Studio recording, mixing, and mastering. I think in general, the different, like the sample at the start with the person talking about the waveforms and the eardrums and the music, as well as the occasional vocal drops, the different pads and leads and sequences and synths and basses we had alongside the different drum patterns and textures and sample sounds, and anything else we had in there to kind of like as air candy. They typically present themselves well in the frequency spectrum, as well as the stereo field music around you in your headphones. It was very sort of like intriguing and things were exciting, you know. There was dynamic range, things weren't too squeezed. It was nice and loud, but a pumping with the sidechaining, the kicks, bus suppression, and limiting is handled. And I just want to mention that if there were resonant frequencies, they were deliberate, and that's just a clear intent and sort of polish on the part of AFM in order with what they do with this music. It's very, very good. So, you know, no applicable constructive critique for me. It's an interesting journey that we went on here. And from a general listener's perspective, I like these shorter tracks which have more of a sort of adventurous vibe to them. I think that you can get away with the shorter form factor without needing to tell a huge story within it. Like if you don't, especially with instrumental tracks, if you're not wanting to teach the listener something, just provide a nice ambience for them to be a part of in a way that's exciting in part because of the journey that you take them on without the words being spoken. Allow them to want to know more of your music and more of what you do. And I feel that AFM ticked the boxes here. But thank you very much for watching my review of this track from AFM titled Jinx. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please go show them some love via their various social medias and a SoundCloud page, and stay cool and stay safe, and please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as they need the help more than ever with all the crazy stuff going on in the world. And I will catch you in the next SB Reacts. Spiderhands out.